We're just going to see how we do. This is going to be a weird class. I need another call. But, however, so the judges, as I say, these are kind of warlords or chieftains who are being reported from various different isolated tribes. And ultimately, the main takeaway that I want to give, we think that this book may likely have been written by Samuel. And let me finish this list, and this will make sense to you about Samuel. Because after Judges, there's a love story, really. It's a beautiful love story called Ruth. Ruth is the daughter-in-law of a woman named Naomi. And it says in the first line of the book, in the time of the Judges. So it's a little beautiful side story in the same era, from the same time frame. And ultimately, the end of the love story is that Ruth marries a man named Boaz. Boaz is the son of Rahab, we heard about last week. So Rahab, listed in Jesus' genealogy, she's the harlot, the woman who hid the Jewish spies in Jericho, and she hung some red cloth out her window and asked that her family be spared, and they were spared. She went on to have a family of her own, and her son was named Boaz, and Boaz is the forefather of Jesus. And Ruth, as a Moabite woman, a non-Jew, married into Jesus' family tree. So that's a story that fits in with this. And then what will follow after that is 1st and 2nd Samuel, which is the story of how the Jews eventually said, we want a king like everybody else. And they chose King Saul and eventually King David. So if it's true, I don't know definitively, but if it's true that Samuel wrote Judges, he's writing from a perspective of we are now a nation with a king. And I'm looking back on history when they didn't have a king, when things were more chaotic and less optimal. And his little critiques that are added into the text give you a hint that from the author's perspective, a king would be preferred. The best would be if the king was God, but he sort of explains some of the chaos of the book of Judges away by the fact that it's pre-kingly era. But that's kind of the flow of the story. But it's important to understand that the book of Judges, in the end, it's a tragedy. It's not a story of good news. It's not a story of you should imitate these people. They're kind of despicable individuals. And the pattern, if any, is that each judge gets worse. There are 6 main judges, but as you go through the list, they actually are worse human beings, one after another. One of the more useful things about it is it reveals a pattern, which is a recurring pattern. It recurs before, in the desert, and it recurs later, and it recurs in our life. It's a cyclical thing. It's why I was saying earlier, why do we have Lent every year? Why can't I just do it once and say, now I'm holy enough, stick a fork in me? I achieved it, because next year I'll be all screwed up again and I need to go through Lent again. So the pattern is there's sinfulness going on. And because of sin, because the people have forgotten God, they stop receiving blessing. The situation stops being positive. They start suffering. They start being persecuted. Their outcomes of their endeavors go down because God is the source of all goodness and blessing. So if you turn your back from the one source of goodness and blessing, it's predictable. So the sin leads to oppression. Is some foreign king will come into the land in one of the territories and start oppressing the Jewish people in that tribal area. I don't think any of these stories, by the way, apply to all 12 territories. They're just isolated tales where various foreign entities came in for a number of years and ruled over the Jewish people. And they're sort of back in the state of slavery like in Egypt. They're under the brutal rule of a foreign king who's not sympathetic to them. So they're oppressed, but in that oppression, they repent. They realize, we forgot God. This is why this is happening. We turn from Him, and they go through a conversion type of experience as a people. They have a big tent revival, and then eventually deliverance happens. God provides a judge for them, and they return to a state of peace, and then inevitably they forget that the peace came from God, not from them. They start taking credit for that peace. They start to sin, and it starts all over again. That's the pattern of the story of Judges. And the 6 major judges are Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson. We're going to hit on those. But I want to highlight the most important details of this book, which I don't think are about the judges. First of all, break. But at least it's a clean break right there. So we'll jump into the text.